Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The small cafe was almost empty, save for a few regulars scattered across the room. Outside, the wind howled, and the storm was just beginning to pick up. Speed. The waitress, Mia, moved quickly between the tables, wiping them down, making small talk with customers, and occasionally glancing at the clock. She had a long shift ahead, but her mind wasn't on the work. It was her grandmother's birthday tomorrow, and she had promised to make it special. That meant a long list of things to do, and the idea of juggling it with her day job was weighing heavily on her. She had always loved her grandmother, but the older woman had a peculiar way of expecting a lot. Tomorrow's celebration needed to be perfect. Mia had already arranged for a cake and flowers, and she had picked out a beautiful dress for herself. The only thing left was one last simple request her grandmother had made. "Find someone to bring with you," her grandmother had said over the phone, her voice tinged with both hope and nostalgia. Someone special. Mia had barely had time to process it before her grandmother hung up, leaving her to wonder if she had heard correctly. But Mia wasn't dating anyone at the moment, and she couldn't think of anyone she would want to take to such an intimate gathering. So she decided to make up a story. She would say she had a boyfriend, and maybe later she would make up an excuse for his absence. The pressure to satisfy her grandmother's expectations was overwhelming. As Mia wiped down the last table, she felt the eyes of someone watching her. She turned, and there he was, a man sitting alone at a corner table, by the window, his gaze unwavering. He was dressed in a torn jacket, worn-out boots, and a beanie pulled low over his head, a homeless man. He wasn't the type of person who usually came into the cafe. The owner, Tom, didn't like having people like him around, especially not during peak hours. But the man had sat there quietly, not asking for anything but a cup of coffee. Still, Mia felt a strange discomfort. It wasn't the man's appearance, but the intensity of his eyes. They were sharp, calculating, almost as if he was studying her. Mia gave him a small nod, her hands instinctively folding the rag in her hands as she prepared to move on. But before she could walk away, he spoke. "Excuse me." His voice was raspy, but there was an underlying calmness to it. "I need your help." Mia hesitated, looking over her shoulder at Tom, who was busy in the back of the cafe, oblivious to the interaction. It wasn't unusual for customers to ask for help, but something about this man made her pause. "I'm not sure I can help you, sir," she said politely, half expecting him to ask for change or a meal. But he shook his head. "No, I need more than that." He paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I want you to marry me." Mia blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. She laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was some kind of joke. "What? I know this sounds crazy," he said, his voice steady, "but hear me out. I have a plan. You need a boyfriend for tomorrow, right? For your grandmother's birthday, and I can help you with that." Mia stared at him, the absurdity of the situation sinking in. She was about to walk away, but something in his expression made her stop. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't trying to make a joke. He was serious. His eyes held a strange determination, as if he wasn't asking for something trivial. He was asking for her trust. "Why would you want to help me?" she asked cautiously, crossing her arms as she leaned against the counter. He leaned forward, slightly, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. "Because you're struggling. I can see it, and I've been where you are. Trust me. I've lived on the streets, and I've seen the kind of pressure people like you are under. The kind of pressure that makes you do things you wouldn't normally do, but you don't have to go through it alone. I can help." Mia frowned, unsure of how to respond. "I don't know who you are, and I'm not sure I understand what you're asking." He sighed deeply, as if preparing himself for something bigger. "I can be the boyfriend you need. I'll marry you for the night. You don't have to worry about anything. I'll play the part. And tomorrow, When you walk into that party with your grandmother, you'll be able to show her the man you want her to see. I'll even dress the part. It'll be as if nothing ever happened." Mia's heart raced. She was still trying to make sense of what he was saying. "And why would you do this? What do you want in return?" His gaze softened, and for the first time, she noticed the weariness in his eyes. "I don't want anything from you. I just want to help. You don't have to understand why. But sometimes people come into your life at the right moment. You just have to trust them." For a moment, Mia stood there frozen in place. She had never met anyone like him, someone so direct, so confident in what he was offering. She knew it was crazy, but there was something about the sincerity in his voice that made her hesitate. Her grandmother's birthday was important to her, and she couldn't afford to disappoint her again. But this man, this stranger, seemed to have a solution to a problem she had been struggling with for days. "Okay," she said finally, her voice shaky but determined. "Let's say I believe you. What happens next?" He smiled, a brief, fleeting smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll meet you tomorrow. We'll go to your grandmother's house. I'll play the part. And when the night's over, we'll both walk away." Mia nodded, still unsure but feeling a strange sense of relief. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but what choice did she have? It wasn't as though she could just call anyone to play the role of her boyfriend on such short notice. This was her chance to make her grandmother's birthday perfect. As she prepared to leave for the night, she glanced back at him. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan," he replied, "but you'll probably never need to know." The next day came faster than Mia had anticipated. She woke up with a start, the early morning light creeping through the blinds of her small apartment. Her mind immediately raced back to the events of last night. Ethan, the strange offer, the weird but oddly comforting sense of trust she felt. She hadn't thought much about it overnight. She'd fallen asleep exhausted after working her shift. At the cafe, her mind too busy to focus on anything else. But now, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts swirled in confusion. What was she getting herself into? She didn't even know this man, a homeless stranger who had come out of nowhere and made a proposal that felt both ludicrous and somehow necessary. Mia swung her legs off the bed, feeling the cold of the hardwood floor beneath her feet. She rubbed her eyes and walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face in an attempt to wake herself up. But the clarity she was hoping for didn't come. She grabbed her phone and checked the time. It was almost noon. Her grandmother's birthday party was only a few hours away, and she had little time left to prepare. She grabbed her dress from the closet, an elegant knee-length piece in a soft shade of purple that she knew her grandmother would love. After quickly changing, Mia packed a small bag with a few essentials, her makeup, a pair of shoes, and her grandmother's gift. The whole situation felt surreal. A homeless man had agreed to play her boyfriend for the night, simply to help her avoid disappointing her grandmother. It sounded ridiculous, but she couldn't deny the odd sense of relief she felt, knowing she had someone who had seemingly volunteered to play the role. As she prepared to leave, Mia's thoughts turned to Ethan. Again, she still didn't know much about him. His offer had been quick and direct, but it lacked any real details. Where did he come from? What was his story? Why did he choose to help her? And why did he seem so insistent that this would help her? There was a knock at the door, pulling her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she approached and peeked through the peephole. To her surprise, it was him, Ethan, standing outside her door. He was wearing a new outfit, black jeans, a button-down shirt that was a little too big for him, and a pair of boots. His hair was neatly combed, and there was a look of determination in his eyes. He didn't look like the man she had met last night at all. He looked different, cleaner, more put together. Mia opened the door cautiously. "Ethan?" she asked, trying to read his expression. He nodded. "I said I'd be here." He glanced past her into the apartment, his eyes lingering on the neat little space she called home. "You ready to go?" She was stunned at how quickly. Things were moving, but there was something about him that seemed so certain, so calm. He stepped inside without waiting for her to respond. "I'll grab my bag," she said, still trying to process the fact that this man, this complete stranger, was about to be her date for the night. As Mia grabbed her things, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about this situation wasn't right. But she wasn't sure what. Ethan hadn't asked for anything in return. He wasn't pressuring her. He seemed genuine. But then again, she hadn't known him long enough to truly understand his motives. She had asked him why he wanted to help. Her and his response had been simple. Sometimes people come into your life when you need them most. But why now? Why her? Mia couldn't help but feel like there was something he was holding back, something he wasn't saying. Once they were both in the car, Ethan drove in silence. The roads were quiet, the rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with the remnants of the storm. Mia sat with her arms folded in her lap, staring out the window, trying to gather her thoughts. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her from time to time, but she didn't meet his gaze. "So, what's the plan?" she asked after a while, finally breaking the silence. "How exactly do you plan to make this believable?" He gave a small smile, his hands on the wheel. "Don't worry, we'll keep it simple. You don't need to do anything different. Just be yourself. Your grandmother will believe it's real, and that's all that matters." Mia nodded, but didn't feel entirely reassured. As they neared her grandmother's house, a part of her felt sick. This wasn't just a fake date. This wasn't just pretending. She was involving someone she didn't know, into her family's life. She was about to show him the parts of her world that were most important to her. When they arrived, Ethan parked the car, and Mia stepped out, trying to maintain her composure. She could feel Ethan beside her, walking just a little too close, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she reached for the doorbell and pressed it. Her grandmother opened the door, her eyes lighting up with warmth as soon as she saw Mia. But when she noticed Ethan, her expression softened into something else. A gentle curiosity, perhaps, mixed with confusion. "Mia, my dear," her grandmother said, pulling her into a hug. "You look lovely, as always." She paused, glancing at Ethan. "And who's this?" Mia hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. "Grandma, this is Ethan, my boyfriend." Ethan stepped forward, offering a polite smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am." Her grandmother studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to read something deeper beneath the surface. "Well, I'm glad you're here," she said at last, stepping aside to let them both inside. "I've been hoping you'd find someone special." The door clicked shut behind them, and Mia felt a wave of relief mixed with guilt wash over her. She had successfully pulled it off. She'd introduced Ethan as her boyfriend, and for now her grandmother seemed satisfied. But the feeling of unease remained, hanging in the air like a cloud. As the night unfolded, Mia tried to focus on the celebration. She joined her family at the table, laughing and chatting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She looked over at Ethan, who was talking to her uncle. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something that Mia couldn't place. The evening wore on, and as they sat down to eat, Mia felt a strange tension between them. Ethan had been so quiet, too quiet. She had expected him to be more involved, but instead he had withdrawn into himself, watching everyone with a silent intensity. As the night grew late, Mia excused herself from the table and made her way to the kitchen, her head spinning. She had no idea how to handle this. What was the point of all of this? Why had Ethan come into her life like this? And why did she feel like there was something he wasn't telling her? Just as she turned to go back to the dining room, she heard a voice from behind her. "You should have never trusted me." The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth. "You should have never trusted me." Mia froze, her back to the door, her pulse suddenly hammering in her ears. The kitchen felt colder, the buzzing of the refrigerator louder in the stillness. She turned slowly, her heart skipping a beat as she saw Ethan standing there, his posture relaxed, but his expression unreadable. "Ethan," she whispered, a sense of dread creeping into her chest. The evening had been going too smoothly. Her grandmother was charmed by him, and her family had bought the story. Everything seemed perfect, but in that moment everything felt wrong. The air around them had shifted, the mood now dark and heavy. He stepped closer, his eyes intense but distant, as though he was seeing through her, not at her. "You shouldn't have let me in. Not like this." Mia's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. "You said you were helping me." Ethan's lips curled into a faint, almost bitter smile. "I did, didn't I? But helping you is the least of what I can do. You'll regret it soon enough. It's too late to go back now." A chill ran down Mia's spine. She had known something was off, but she hadn't expected this. She had thought she was in control, that this was all just a strange arrangement. But now Ethan was making it clear that he had an agenda, a reason for being here that went far beyond a simple favor. "Why are you saying these things?" Mia asked, her mind racing. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" He stood silent for a moment, staring at her, his eyes flickering with something that Mia couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger or malice. It was something colder, more calculated. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low and deliberate. "I told you. You don't want to know who I really am." His words were cryptic, like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Ethan had helped her, yes, but now he was speaking as though he had something to hide, something more than just his past. Before Mia could respond, her grandmother's voice called out from the dining room, "Mia, is everything okay in there?" Mia's stomach twisted. She quickly wiped her hands on her dress, a sudden surge of anxiety taking hold of her. This wasn't the way she'd imagined things turning out. She had come here to make her grandmother happy, to give her a night to remember. But now her life felt like it was spiraling into something much darker. Mia took a step toward the kitchen door, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just getting a drink." Ethan's eyes followed her as she moved, and for a second she thought she saw something else there, a flicker of something almost regretful, but then it was gone, replaced by the same unreadable expression. As Mia stepped back into the dining room, she felt Ethan's eyes still on her, the weight of his presence making her uneasy. The room felt warmer now, the laughter and chatter of her family filling the space, but it wasn't enough to chase away the cold feeling in her gut. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "You shouldn't have trusted me." She couldn't stop thinking about them. What had he meant? She tried to push it from her mind, focusing on the present. Her grandmother was speaking to her, asking her about the dress she had picked out for the party. But Mia's responses felt disconnected, like she was on autopilot. She nodded and smiled, but inside she was drowning in questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. Later, after the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Mia found herself alone with Ethan once again. The house was quiet now, save for the soft sound of a clock ticking in the background. Her grandmother had retired to her room, leaving Mia to clean up. Ethan lingered in the hallway, his gaze still distant, as if he were waiting for something. "Do you need something?" Mia asked, trying to keep the tension out of her voice. She wasn't sure why she felt so compelled to be polite to him, but something about his silence made her uneasy. Ethan finally turned, his gaze intense. "I don't need anything from you, Mia," he said, his voice cold now. I just wanted to make sure you understand the danger you're in. You think you can keep this a secret, but it's bigger than you. You've gotten too close." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room as if weighing his words carefully. "I told you it's too late to go back now. You're already in deeper than you realize." His cryptic warnings only deepened the mystery, leaving Mia with more questions than answers. She had thought she could handle the situation. She had believed that Ethan was just a strange man who had crossed her path for a night, someone she could easily forget once everything was over. But now she wasn't so sure. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, stepping closer, her voice firm despite the fear creeping up her spine. "Why are you saying these things?" Ethan met her gaze. For the first time, Mia saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something more human, more vulnerable. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the same guarded expression he had worn. "Since the beginning, I don't want anything from you," he replied softly, "but you need to understand something. I didn't just come here to play a part in your little lie. I came because I needed you to know the truth." "The truth," Mia repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "What truth?" He took a deep breath, and for the first time, Mia saw a hint of hesitation in him. He was holding something back, something important. "The truth is, I'm not just some random guy. I wasn't always homeless. I was someone else before all of this. And the reason I helped you, why I wanted to be with you tonight, wasn't just because of your grandmother. It's because of you, Mia." Her pulse quickened as she processed his words. "What do you mean?" "I've been watching you for a long time. I knew you'd be in this situation. I knew you'd need help. And I'm the one who's been behind it all." Mia felt the floor beneath her shift. "What do you mean, behind it all?" Ethan finally stepped forward, closing the gap between them. He looked deep into her eyes, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm the reason you're here tonight. I'm the reason you met me. And now, you'll have to deal with the consequences." Mia stood frozen, the weight of his words crashing over her like a wave. Every part of her screamed to run, to escape, but something in her held her back. There was a part of her that wanted to understand, to know the truth, no matter how dark it might be. But Ethan wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, as if preparing for something monumental. "You wanted a perfect night for your grandmother, Mia. But what you don't understand is that sometimes we don't get what we want. Sometimes the things we think are helping us are the ones that hurt us the most." Mia's thoughts spun out of control. She couldn't process everything he was saying. Who was this man? What had he meant by he had been behind it all? And then, as if to seal the mystery, Ethan turned away, his face cold once more. "You'll see soon enough. The truth will come for you, whether you're ready or not." And with that he was gone, leaving Mia standing alone, a million questions swirling in her mind, and a growing sense of dread filling her chest. Mia sat alone in the living room, the soft tick of the clock on the wall her only companion. The silence felt oppressive, suffocating even. The words Ethan had spoken replayed in her mind over and over again, each one sinking deeper into her thoughts like a stone dropped into a pond, sending ripples that disturbed everything she thought she knew. "I'm the reason you're here. Tonight, I'm the reason you met me, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences." Mia shuddered, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the couch. What had he meant by that? What consequences? And how had Ethan, this Ethan, the homeless man who had claimed to be nothing more than a passing stranger, been behind everything? Her mind was racing, her thoughts scattered like a whirlwind. The events of the past 24 hours were a blur. A man had come into her life, a man she barely knew, and now he was leaving her with more questions than she could count. She had trusted him, believed in his story, and now it felt like she was falling into a web of lies that was spinning out of control. Her grandmother had been asleep for hours, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. Mia needed answers. She couldn't let this go on. She had to confront Ethan. The clock struck midnight, and Mia stood up abruptly, her decision made. She couldn't wait any longer. She needed to find Ethan, figure out the truth, and put an end to the unease that had settled in her chest. She grabbed her coat and walked toward the door, pausing for a moment to glance back at her grandmother's room. The house felt empty without her grandmother's presence, and the weight of her trust in Mia hung heavy in the air. Mia had promised her grandmother that everything would be perfect, but now it was anything but. The street outside was cold and quiet, the darkness of the night swallowing up the light from the street lamps. Mia's breath puffed out in small clouds, her thoughts focused only on finding Ethan. She didn't know where he was or where to start looking, but there was one place she could check, the small cafe where they had first met. She walked briskly, her feet clicking on the pavement, her mind racing. What would she say to him? How would she confront him about what he had told her? And more importantly, what was the truth? The cafe was closed when she arrived, its windows dark and silent. Mia's heart sank. She stood in front of the door for a moment, her breath fogging up the glass. But just as she was about to turn away, she noticed a figure sitting in the shadows near the back of the cafe, the soft glow of a cigarette lighter flickering in the dark. Her pulse quickened, and she took a cautious step forward, her eyes narrowing to make out the figure. There was no mistaking it. Ethan. She approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the empty street. When she was close enough, Ethan looked up, his face partially illuminated by the light from the cigarette. He didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he looked almost expectant. "I knew you'd come," he said quietly, taking a slow drag from the cigarette before flicking it to the ground. "You have questions." Mia crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You're right. I do. I don't understand any of this, Ethan. What did you mean when you said you were behind it all? What are you hiding from me?" Ethan stood up, his movements slow, deliberate. He looked tired, as if the weight of whatever was going on was pressing down on him just as heavily as it was on her. He took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think. I didn't choose this for you. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Mia's frustration flared. "Then how did it happen, Ethan? Why are you here? Why did you offer to help me, only to turn around and leave me with more questions than answers?" Ethan's eyes flickered with something dark, something that made Mia's heart race. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I came because I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong." "Protect me from what?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly, despite her best efforts to keep it steady. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his eyes distant, as if he were seeing something far beyond the small cafe. "There are things you don't know about me. Things I didn't want you to find out. Things I never wanted to drag you into." "Like what?" Mia pressed, her voice sharper now. "What aren't you telling me?" He sighed heavily, his gaze dropping to the ground for a moment before he looked back at her. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Mia took a step closer, her frustration building. "Try me." Ethan hesitated, then finally spoke, his voice laced with a quiet urgency. "I used to be someone important, someone with connections. I had a life, money, power, everything, but I made mistakes, big mistakes. And now I'm paying the price for them." Mia's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I got involved with the wrong people," he continued, his voice becoming more strained. "People who don't take kindly to betrayal. And because of that, I lost everything, my job, my home, everything. And when I hit rock bottom, they found me. They found me and made me a pawn in their game." Mia's confusion deepened. "Who are they, Ethan? What game are you talking about?" He took a step back, running his hands through his hair again. "I can't tell you everything, not yet, but I can tell you this. Everything that's happened between us, the reason I'm here, the reason you met me, is all part of something bigger, something I can't escape. Mia felt her chest tighten as she tried to process his words. She had come here looking for answers, but now she was drowning in more questions. Who was this man? What had he gotten himself involved in? And what did this all have to do with her? "You need to get out of here," Ethan said suddenly, his voice sharp. "You need to leave before it's too late." "What are you talking about?" Mia asked, panic rising in her chest. "What do you mean, too late?" But before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the street. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she turned, her eyes widening when she saw a group of men approaching, their faces shadowed but their intentions clear. Ethan cursed under his breath and grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her toward the back of the cafe. "They found us," he muttered, his voice filled with urgency. "We don't have much time." Mia's heart raced as she stumbled behind him, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. Who were these men? What did they want with Ethan? And why was she suddenly dragged into this world she didn't understand? "Come on," Ethan urged, pulling her faster. "We need to get out of here." As they rounded the corner, Mia's mind was reeling. The truth was out there, but she couldn't make sense of it. Ethan's past, his involvement with these mysterious people, none of it added up. And now it seemed like she was caught in the middle of something dangerous. The men were getting closer, and Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced over at Ethan. "What is this, Ethan? What have you gotten me into?" Ethan's eyes were filled with regret as he looked back at her. "I never wanted you involved, Mia, but now there's no turning back." And with that, they disappeared into the night, running from the danger. That had found them both. Mia's breath came in ragged bursts as she and Ethan ran through the dark alleyways. The sounds of footsteps, shouting, and the heavy thuds of men pursuing them echoed in the night air. Every corner they turned, every step they took, seemed to take them deeper into a world Mia had never imagined. She had no idea what Ethan had gotten them into, but one thing was clear. Whatever it was far bigger than she had ever anticipated. They rounded another corner, and Ethan grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her into the shadows. His grip was tight, almost desperate. His face was flushed, eyes wide, as if the weight of what was happening was crashing down on him. "Stay quiet," he whispered urgently, pulling her close to him as they hid behind a stack of old crates. The noise from the men hunting them grew fainter for a moment, but Mia could still hear the occasional shout and the sharp clinking of metal. "What's happening, Ethan?" Mia hissed, trying to keep her voice down, though panic rose in her chest. "Who are these people? Why are they after you? What do they want?" Ethan's eyes darted around, scanning the alley as though expecting someone to leap out at any moment. His expression was hard, and for the first time since they'd met, Mia saw the raw edges of fear in his eyes. But it wasn't just fear. It was something darker, something that hinted at a past that Ethan had never wanted anyone to know. "I told you," Ethan muttered, his voice strained. "I made mistakes. They don't forget mistakes like mine." Mia looked at him, her heart racing as the pieces of this strange puzzle started to form in her mind. She wanted answers, but she wasn't sure if Ethan could give them to her, not in the state he was in. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the way he struggled to keep his emotions in check. This wasn't just about her grandmother's birthday party anymore. It was about something far more dangerous. "Who are they, Ethan?" Mia repeated, her voice cracking with urgency. "Who are you running from?" Ethan didn't answer at first. He stared at the ground, his jaw clenched, as if he were trying to push the memories back into the recesses of his mind. Finally, he looked up, his eyes filled with an intensity that Mia couldn't ignore. "I used to work for a private security company," he began, his voice low and almost reluctant. "We were hired to protect high-profile clients, corporate, elites, politicians, you name it. But somewhere along the line, things got messy. I got involved in a job I shouldn't have, a job that ended up costing me everything." Mia's mind raced as she tried to process his words. "A job? What kind of job?" Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze distant. It was supposed to be a simple protection detail. Escort a client from one location to another, make sure nothing happened. But things went wrong. The client was someone dangerous, someone who had connections to some very unsavory people. And I made the mistake of letting my guard down. I didn't realize who I was dealing with until it was too late. Mia could feel the weight of his words, but she couldn't fully understand the depth of what he was saying. She had always known Ethan as the man who had come to her aid, the stranger with a mysterious past, but now she realized that the past he was running from was not something she could easily escape. It wasn't just about a favor anymore. It was about survival. "And now they're after you?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper, the reality of the situation hitting her with full force. "Who are they?" "They're a group of mercenaries," Ethan said, his voice filled with bitterness. "People who do the dirty work for anyone, with enough money. They've been hunting me down for months, trying to get information about a job I walked away from, a job that could have gotten me killed." Mia felt a chill wash over her. "And you think they're after me now too?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes clouded with regret. "I never wanted you involved in this. I thought I could keep you safe. But now they know about you, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She had thought she was helping a stranger. She had thought she was just playing along to please her grandmother. But now she was in the middle of something far darker than she had ever imagined. "You said I was part of something bigger." "What does that mean?" Mia asked, her voice barely audible. "Why me?" Ethan took a deep breath, glancing nervously down the alley before turning his attention back to her. "You don't realize it, but you're connected to something that goes back further than I can explain. You're part of a bigger picture. And by helping you, I made myself a target. I didn't think you'd get caught up in it. I didn't want you to." Mia's mind reeled with confusion. "What picture, Ethan? What are you talking about?" But Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her closer to him, his body tense, his hand gripping her arm. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "We can't stay here, not anymore. We need to leave. Now. They're too close." Mia's instinct screamed at her to run, to get away from this situation. But where would they go? She had no idea what Ethan was involved in, but it was clear that whatever it was dangerous, and now she was a part of it. "Where do we go?" Mia asked, her voice trembling as she fought to keep her composure. "What do we do now?" Ethan's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Mia saw the true weight of his desperation. "I know a place. It's safe, but we have to move quickly. They'll be on us soon." Before Mia could respond, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, dozens of them, coming closer down the alley. Her heart raced, panic setting in as she realized how close they were. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, his pace quickening as they dashed through the alley, weaving through the darkness with no clear direction. All Mia could hear was the sound of their footsteps echoing in the night and the distant voices calling out to each other, hunting for them. They ran for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. Mia's lungs burned, her legs aching with the strain of keeping up with Ethan. But she didn't dare slow down. She couldn't. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ethan pulled her into a small, run-down building. It was dark inside, the only light coming from the faint glow of a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were bare, the floors covered in dust. It looked abandoned, but to Mia, it was the safest place she had been all night. Ethan slammed the door shut behind them and locked it quickly, his breathing ragged as he leaned against the door for a moment to collect himself. Mia stood there, her heart still pounding in her chest, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are we?" Ethan's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of something else in them, something that wasn't fear or regret, but something far deeper. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the sound of the door being kicked in echoed through the building. "They've found us." The door shuddered violently as the men outside slammed into it once again. The force of the blow rattled the worn frame of the old building, and Mia's heart jumped into her throat. She could hear the distinct sound of boots scuffing against the cracked pavement outside, the low murmur of voices, and the scrape of metal on metal. Ethan, standing beside her in the dim light of the abandoned building, was tense, his eyes flicking nervously to the door. Sweat trickled down his forehead, his grip tight on the weapon he had pulled from his jacket earlier. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice low but firm. Mia wanted to speak, to ask more questions, but the sight of Ethan, so calm, yet so clearly desperate, held her silent. She didn't know what to believe anymore. She didn't know who the real Ethan was. The man who had claimed to help her, the stranger she had invited into her life, or the man who was now standing before her, armed and ready to protect her from some unseen danger. The door rattled again, and this time the lock gave way with a sickening crack. The hinges groaned as the door burst open, revealing 3 men silhouetted in the moonlight, their figures tall and menacing. They were dressed in dark, tactical clothing, their eyes hidden behind darkened goggles, and each one held a weapon. Large, intimidating, and designed for nothing less than violence. Ethan moved first, stepping forward with a determined stride. Mia barely had time to react before Ethan raised his gun, his voice steady, despite the chaos around them. "Get back," he ordered, his eyes locked on the men, but they didn't back down. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward with a slow, deliberate motion, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You think you can escape us, Ethan?" the man sneered. "You think you can run and hide forever?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Mia saw the weight of the past in his eyes. There was no fear in him now, just an icy determination. He wasn't just trying to protect her. He was trying to right the wrongs of his past. "I'm not running anymore," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. The man with the scar chuckled, as though Ethan's defiance were amusing to him. "You were always too arrogant, Ethan, always thinking you could play both sides. You chose to walk away, but now you've come back, and you've brought the girl with you. Bad choice." "Leave her out of this," Ethan snapped, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I'm the one you want. Take me and let her go." The scarred man's expression darkened, and he signaled to the other 2 men. Without a word, they moved toward Ethan, their guns raised. Mia's heart thudded in her chest as she realized that the situation was slipping out of control. They weren't here for a simple confrontation. They were here to end this. But before the men could make a move, Ethan fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the loud crack of the gun splitting the air. The men froze, their hands tightening around their weapons. For a brief moment, the tension hung heavy in the air, like a storm about to break. "You want to kill me, don't you?" Ethan said, his voice eerily calm. "Then do it. But you won't get what you want, not unless you kill me." Mia watched in stunned silence. The man with the scar seemed to weigh Ethan's words for a moment, and for a brief second, Mia thought they might back down. But then the scarred man stepped forward again, his smirk returning. "Kill you?" he said with mock amusement. "We've already done that. What's left now is to clean up the mess you made. You were a fool to think you could walk away. Ethan, you were a fool to think they would just let you disappear." Ethan's face hardened, his grip on the gun tightening. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." Mia's pulse quickened as she realized what Ethan had been trying to protect her from. This wasn't just some random group of mercenaries. It was a hit squad, a group sent to eliminate Ethan for good. But why was she involved? What had Ethan's past meant for her future? The scarred man raised his hand, signaling for his men to lower their guns. You think you can just walk away from us, Ethan? You think you can just live the life of a nobody? I don't think so. Mia's voice broke through the tension, trembling but strong. What do you want with him? What did he do? The man, with the scar, turned his gaze on her, his smile chilling. Oh, sweetie, it's not what he did, it's what he knows. Ethan here knows too much about a deal gone wrong, about people who don't like it when they're crossed. Mia's stomach twisted in horror as the words sank in. Ethan wasn't just running from his past. He was running from a network of dangerous people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. The scarred man stepped closer to Mia, and for a moment she thought he might strike. But Ethan reacted instantly, stepping between Mia and the man, his gun raised and aimed directly at him. "Stay away from her," Ethan growled, his voice low but commanding. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, with a sudden, almost imperceptible movement, the scarred man raised his hand in surrender, signaling his men to step back. "You think you can stop us, Ethan? You think you can take us all down?" "I've already made my peace," Ethan said, his eyes locking onto the scarred man's. "If I die tonight, then at least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing I took down one of you." The scarred man's eyes narrowed as he regarded Ethan. "You're delusional," he muttered, but his words were tinged with respect. "You really think you can walk away from this? You think you can change the game?" Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Mia, his face softening for the first time in days. "Mia, you need to leave, now." Mia's mind was spinning. She couldn't leave him, not now. But there was no time to argue. The danger was too real, too immediate. She glanced back at the men, then at Ethan, whose face was grim with resolve. This was it. This was the moment of reckoning. "I'm not going anywhere," Mia said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "I'm staying with you." Ethan's eyes softened as he met her gaze. "Mia, you don't understand. These men will stop at nothing to get what they want." "I can't risk you getting hurt, but I'm already involved," she replied. "I can't just walk away from you now." For a long moment, Ethan stood silent, his gaze fixed on her. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, he exhaled, sharply, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had finally descended upon him. "Then let's end this." With one swift motion, Ethan turned back to the men, his voice cold as ice. "If you want me, come and get me." The scarred man stepped forward, his face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You'll regret it." And with that, the battle began. The end.